Welcome to my 2025 MLS team preview show, where I'm going to go through all 30 teams. I'll give you a brief rundown of what each team has been up to in the off season, new coach hirings and player additions, what I believe you can expect from each and every one of these teams this season, along with final standing predictions. At the end of the recording, I'm also going to give you a best bet for the opening day of games coming up this Saturday. And I'll continue to do so with a weekly video or two with more best bets for the entire season. So feel free to tail or fade as you wish. I'm here to help you make some extra money, add to your bankroll just like I did in the NFL season with the best NFL podcast on the planet, the best record, the best results. No one even came close to what I did for you this season. I'm going to do that for you again here in the MLS, a rapidly growing league that I believe that eventually will become a top 5 league in the world. It'll take some time, maybe a couple more decades, but I believe it's already starting to head in the right direction to make that happen with acquisitions and big player talent like David Beckham back in the day got things going. Now we have players with the caliber of Lionel Messi in the league. My God, that's a good sign for this league and where it could be headed. It's a diamond in the rough, in my opinion, a gem that we need to take advantage on and cash on. Nobody else in the business is taking advantage, so I thought, why not me? Let me get out here and help you out. Let me be the first to show you how easy it is to make some extra cash on this sport. So, without further ado, let's get to the previews, and I'll do it in alphabetical order, starting first with the Atlanta United. So this is going to be one of many teams we talk about this season with new head coaches. Atlanta let go of Rob Valentino to make way for former New York City FC manager Ronnie Dela. If you remember, this Norwegian coach left MLS in 2022 to lead Standard Liège in the Belgian Pro League before making his return now to Atlanta. He's also got a new sporting director, Chris Henderson, to work with. And they've got many new faces after letting go of a ton of players. Centeno, Firmino, Hernandez, Ibarra, Thiare, and Wolf, to name a few. And they ended up signing Togashi and midfielder Matuas Klitsch. The biggest signing of all, though, and this is their biggest off-season move, was bringing in Emmanuel Latte-Lath from the EFL Championship side Middlesbrough. This was a record transfer fee involved in this deal. $22 million was reported. So obviously he's going to be a big part of any success this team might have this season. They did also return Miguel Almiron, so those two will be a big part of however far this team gets. Miguel, there's a Paraguayan playmaker, awesome player, and back in Georgia for the first time since 2019 when he departed the MLS for Premier League side Newcastle United. So those are two big, huge additions to this Atlanta squad. What do I think overall for my final prediction for this team? Definitely playoff contender. Should be middle of the pack in the Eastern Conference. Now, that could be much higher if these new acquisitions, gel, and this team comes together and maybe can give Miami, who is my favorite in the East, a little bit of a go. Definitely a team to be reckoned with and should be taken seriously. We'll see how things work out and how they gel over the early part of the season, heading in towards the mid part to really get a better assessment of where this team is headed. Next team, Austin FC. And I'm just going to go in alphabetical order to keep things pretty simple here, folks. Austin finished 10th in the Western Conference last season, one shy of making the playoffs. So you know they'll be hungry to take that next step. A newer team in the league, getting very close to building up a contender here so they can contend with some of those powerhouses and juggernauts of the Western Conference in LAFC and Galaxy, the Seattles and Real Salt Lakes, etc. And to be able to do that, they bid farewell to Josh Wolf. He was their one and only manager of the club's history to this point. Sporting director Rodolfo Burrell has been working to build this team into a contender, and he's now going to be led by his Spanish compatriot Nico Estevez, who, if you remember, last coach in the MLS with FC Dallas, who just happens to be Austin's rival, to top it all off, between 2022 and 2024. Now, there were more big departures. Sebastian Driussi returned to boyhood club River Plate, ending a run as the club's best ever designated player. Now, that tenure started beautifully, but ended tumultuously, so unfortunate for them there. But they have a big signing. Their biggest offseason move was bringing in Brandon Vasquez from Monterrey. Monterrey, for those of you who don't know, is a Liga MX club juggernaut, up with the best of them, with the likes of Tigres. And he was Monterrey's best player. Now he's with Austin. A lot of teams tried to get Brandon Vasquez, but Austin ended up being the winner. It was a big investment for Austin here. He's at the ripe age of 26. It's a 4-year deal. Transfer fee was around $10 million. And we already know that he can finish and get the job done in the MLS, previously playing for Cincinnati. So it's huge. Now, what do I expect from this team? I expect them to be right around where they were last year, maybe making that step up and finally getting a playoff position and giving a bit of a scare into other more quality teams in the division. I still think they're years away from contending for a cup, but they are taking a step in the right direction with the transactions that have taken place in the offseason. So it'll be interesting to see where Austin ends up at season's end. Next team, Charlotte FC. And what a surprise this team was last season, finishing 5th in the Eastern Conference, only behind the likes of Inter Miami, Columbus, Cincinnati, and Orlando. Wow. I personally can admit that I didn't see that coming. And I'm sure a lot of you also didn't see that coming. So this team is definitely headed in the right direction. Also a new expansion team over the last few years. And what progress they have made. It looks like they are taking this seriously to even take it another step further again this season. So it's a great time to be a Charlotte FC fan. Let's take a look at what they've done on the offseason. Signings, huge ones, including U.S. international midfielder Eric Williamson, who signed from Portland, and then another even bigger name signing from former Premier League forward Wilfried Zaha. So right off the bat, 2 midfielder forward combinations that'll help what was otherwise their probably only problem last season, and that was goal scoring. If that wasn't enough, they went even a step further, and they brought in a DP forward on loan from Galatasaray in the Turkish league, and former Crystal Palace player in Zaha. So you put those two together, the Ivory Coast International especially, he scored 68 goals in 305 appearances for 3 different clubs in the Premier League. Think about that. So now you've got Williamson in the midfield as an attacking forward. You got Wilfried Zaha to add, who's just a phenomenal player who knows how to get the ball in the back of the net. So for a team that allowed the second fewest goals, 37 in total last season, but on the other hand, couldn't get the job done scoring as much and still finish 5th, well, you put it all together, and you've got the hell of a recipe here for possibilities that could be endless. Priceless acquisitions, in my opinion. Again, it's a great time to be a Charlotte FC fan. I love their stadium. Wow, they stack and they pack in, over 70,000 some games. They finished 5th last season, as I mentioned a couple times already. This team, with the acquisitions they have made, have a lot to look forward to. I expect even bigger and better things from Charlotte. They could be the dark horse surprise team of 2026, and I really look forward to seeing how this team continues to progress. Next team, the Chicago Fire. And boy, do I feel sorry for Chicago Fire fans. This team just doesn't seem to be able to put things together. Last in the Eastern Conference. I mean, think about the days where they had Schweinheiser, a German legend. They've brought in other big players over the years, but they just can't seem to get over the hump. Last in the Eastern Conference, a big name like Chicago needed to do some big changes in the offseason. I mean, it's embarrassing. Not just last in the Eastern Conference, second last in the entire league. Only San Jose was worse. So this management needed to do big things in the offseason, and they did. They brought in names like Jake Elliott and Jonathan Bamba. Now, Elliott, he's the type of proven defendable defender that this team needs. They let in way too many goals. So right off the bat, that's huge. They let in 62 goals last year. I think, according to my stats, they were the second or third worst defending team in the league. So right off the bat, that is huge. And as for Bamba, he should be a perfect fit in Greg Berhalter's system, in my opinion. So that's going to be another big acquisition. But the biggest probably will be the hiring Berhalter. By the way, I forgot to mention he is the new manager. He used to be, if you remember, the U.S. men's national team coach. So he's definitely proven. And he's got the accolades. He's won 3 trophies. And made the 2022 World Cup round of 16, if you remember. So this is no slouch coach. I remember there was a day when he was considered one of the best MLS coaches when he was in charge of Columbus, the Crew. And he also led the Crew, by the way, to a cup final in 2015. So with all that said, this is truly a new era in Chicago, or is it? It's hard to say with this Fire team, but I will make a prediction that Berhalter will take this team and the new acquisitions to a playoff spot. I think they will squeeze in that 8th or 9th spot. It'll be a redemption of a season. And finally, fans of the Chicago Fire have a team they can start looking forward to for maybe bigger and better things to come in the years ahead. Next team, FC Cincinnati. And you gotta love being an FC Cincinnati fan these days. Third in the Eastern Conference last year, only behind the likes of Inter Miami and Columbus. Another very successful season. And they look to take that one step further here this year. The biggest off-season move this team made was bringing in a Brazilian talent, Vander, from Portland. And this was another big transfer fee of $12 million. They needed that after losing Acosta. I mean, that was huge. When you lose a player like that, you got to bring in another one, at least close, in order to make up for it. Not sure if Evander's quite to that level, but they did bring in another big player, 25-year-old DP striker Kevin Danke, signed from Brugge in Belgium. And this was another huge one, $16.2 million, breaking the MLS transfer fee at that time. So, will those two players make up for Acosta? It's hard to say. But they brought in two players that potentially could even diversify this team even a little bit more, as the ball was run through Acosta last year and has been for years now. Maybe that's the step they needed to take that extra step, was to bring in two players close to his talent and combine them together and maybe get a little bit more out of it. It's one of those question marks. It's hard to say. So for my final prediction, you can either take this one step further, maybe finish second and challenge Inter Miami for the Eastern Conference Championship, or, and I know you FC Cincinnati fans don't want to hear it, but maybe that Acosta situation and having lost such a big, talented player, one of the best in the league, could end up meaning they fall down in the standings. Again, it's really hard to say. We'll see how things play out. But what they are is definitely a playoff team. There's no doubt about that. So that's my prediction. Playoff team. Where they'll finish, hard to say. But playoffs for sure. Next team, the Colorado Rapids. And they had a successful season last year. No doubt about that. How about a 7th position finish in the Western Conference? And remember, look at the teams they were behind. Powerhouses, FC, Galaxy, Real Salt Lake, Seattle. They were very close to being right up there with the big boys. So the addition of head coach Chris Armas has really paid off for this team. And now, in the offseason, they traded for Chidozie Awazine and Ian Murphy from FC Cincinnati. Big name club with big name players. They've also added low-key attacking boost in Ted Kutipietro, and that was via a cash deal from DC United. They also traded for rising defensive midfielder Josh Intencio from the Sounders. So a lot of moves here for Colorado to take that next step. I think the biggest of all those would be the DiPietro move. He didn't take the biggest step necessarily in DC in 2024, but this kid has got some untapped potential. He's a borderline elite dribbler and adds tons of versatility to a Colorado team that has the ability to play on the wing or as a second forward. And I think he's just an absolute great fit. So, again, if you're a fan of Colorado, it's exciting times. Can they find a way to close the gap? I think so. I think they're ready to take even one more bigger step, possibly get into that top 5 in the Western Conference. It just all has to come into play, gel together with this new core of players. And Chris Armas looks like is fitting in well. And if he can make everybody else fit in just as well here this year, there's a lot to look forward to for you Colorado Rapid fans. Playoffs for sure. Top 5 is a possibility. Next team, Columbus Crew. And what a big season they had last year, finishing second only to Inter Miami in the Eastern Conference. It was close down there in the wire. It looked like Columbus might even be able to pull off the upset and finish first. In the end, they finished second and had a great season. They weren't able to get it done in the playoffs, but overall, a successful season for them. Now, the only problem is this team looks to be one of the first I'm going to talk about this season where they're more than likely headed in the opposite direction that you don't want to head, and that's down in the standings here this year. One of the main reasons is losing one of the most talented players in MLS history when they lost Cucho Hernandez to Real Betis, who came in with a huge offer for him. And he did want to leave the club also, Hernandez. So that'll be it for that. There goes one of the best players right off your team, right off the bat. And if that wasn't bad enough, they also lost Christian Ramirez, who moved to the Galaxy. So talk about gut-wrenching losses in the offseason for you Columbus fans. I feel it. I feel you. Columbus on top didn't even add anybody to make up for them, which is shocking. Or haven't yet. At the time of this recording, I don't know what they've been waiting for. How do you expect to compete with Inter Miami by losing 2 players that good and you don't bring in anybody else? It just doesn't make any sense to me, and I'm a bit surprised because the management of Columbus is top-notch, one of the best in the league, and that's why they've been able to finish at the top of the standings on a yearly basis. So really, I'm a bit shocked, confused, whatever you want to call it, as to what the plan is for this team moving forward and what management is thinking. As of right now, I wonder if they're going to even be able to make the playoffs. I know. That's a very big, bold prediction, but in all honesty, you didn't bring in one impact player to make up for those 2 star players. So I really don't have anything else to add. There's just really nothing more to say. How can we even discuss what to look forward to when there's no other players to discuss for this future and for the making up of losing those 2 players? So again, I wonder if they're even going to be a playoff team this year. If they are, they'll be battling in that 8th or 9th position. In my opinion, they are probably going to be the biggest dropout of all teams that were at the top of the standings. And now the outlook doesn't look nearly as good. Again, my prediction is just to battle it out for that last playoff spot. I really don't see them doing much better unless they can bring in some impact players, which you think they've already done to this point. If not, they better do it before the summer transfer window because this team is definitely going to need some players to make up for their losses. Next team, DC United. Well, overall, I think they would agree it was a disappointing season for DC, who just finished 1 spot out of the playoffs in the Eastern Conference, finishing tied on points with Atlanta, but Atlanta on goal differential was able to squeeze into that last playoff spot. And it was a huge differential at that. Atlanta's goal differential was -3. DC's -18, letting in a whopping 70 goals on the season. That was second in the Eastern Conference only to New England. And in the other conference, only to San Jose. So obviously, defense, a key reason why DC didn't make the playoffs last year. So you'd think the first thing management would be looking forward to in the offseason was getting some defensive help. But you know what? Surprisingly, it's been a very quiet offseason. They've had some signings, but they've been small in my opinion. They have a star player in Benteke they have to work around. And they brought in Australian international center back Rai Rowles. Now, that'll help. He played in the Hearts in the Scottish Premier League, but he's not a star player. I think it does help a little bit, though. Then they also brought in midfielder Randall Leal from the MLS waiver protocol, and also South Korean goalkeeper Kim Yoon Hong, who's from Yeonbuk Hyundai Motors FC. So, am I impressed by these moves? Not so much. Will it help? Maybe. Will it make a big difference? Maybe. But again, I was expecting bigger signings from a team that let in 70 goals. And with that said, I unfortunately think for you DC fans, you're just going to be doing the exact same thing this season as you were last season. Battling for that last playoff spot. It's a shame. They truly needed to do more in the offseason. Hopefully they will before the summer transfer window. But I don't really have high hopes for DC. Sorry, fans. It looks like another long season for you DC United players and fans. Next team, FC Dallas, who's coming off a very disappointing 11th place finish in the Western Conference, so they'll be looking to take some strides and get things back into a playoff spot here this season. However, just like some other teams that really needed to make some big off-season moves, they didn't do any. It's shocking. They traded Jesus Ferreira to Seattle for Leo Chu. Got some international roster slots out of it and some general allocation money, but really, what else did they do? I mean, they bid farewell to record signing Alan Velasco. He joined Boca Juniors. And then center back Nkosi Tafari, he went to LAFC. And Paul Aurelio, who joined Seattle. So, a lot of players going out, nothing really coming back in. I'm shocked, especially for a team that finished that low in the Eastern Conference or Western Conference standings. I mean, this is also a team, by the way, who's under renovations and bringing in a new Toyota Stadium around, 27, 28 or something like that. I mean, maybe they're waiting for that to bring in some big players, but right now it's not looking good. ICFC Dallas, at best, fighting for that final playoff position, but the way it looks right now, I wouldn't be surprised if they finish right around that 10th, 11th, 12th spot like they did last year. So, not the best of times to be an FC Dallas fans, unfortunately, and I really have nothing more to add. They simply just didn't do enough to talk about here in the offseason. So, long season ahead is my prediction for FC Dallas. Next team, Houston Dynamo. A team coming off a 5th place Western Conference finish behind the likes of only LAFC, Galaxy, Real Salt Lake, and Seattle. So, very successful season for them. Now, I thought Houston would make a move or two here to take that next step to potentially move them up to the top of the standings, but if anything, they did just the opposite. Letting go of two of the most recognizable players they have in Hector Herrera and Alberto Carrasquilla to the Liga MX and not bringing anything in return to make up for them. So, my guess here is that Houston still thinks they're a quality enough team to compete even without those two players. Now, I don't know personally if that's the case. I still think they are a good team. I still think they are a playoff team. But you have to bring in somebody to make up for the two big names you've lost. Now, I can't speak for management or what they have in their plans moving forward. Maybe some acquisitions before the summer transfer window ends. But in all honesty, my prediction for this team is to move down the standings until some bigger name players come in. They did bring in Jack McGlynn and one or two other smaller names, but nothing here to really speak of. Nothing here that's going to tell me they're in a position to continue to compete with the juggernauts of the Western Conference. So my prediction for Houston, and sorry to you Dynamo fans, but I really believe this team will at best be battling it out for the bottom playoff spot. I definitely think they are a playoff team. They still have a good enough caliber team, even with those two losses, but I don't see them being in the top five, not even close here this year. So that's my prediction for the Dynamo. Next team, Inter Miami. And right off the bat, I'm going to give you a prediction. I believe Inter Miami is the team to beat and will win the trophy for the championship of the 2026 season. Now, you'd think there wouldn't be as much to be motivated for this year after finishing first in the Eastern Conference, but let's not forget, they were bounced out of the first round of the playoffs against Atlanta United, who had an absolutely unbelievable performance from their goaltender, who used to play in the Premier League, and they shocked the Herons. It was absolutely shocking, to say the least. And I'm sure that didn't go down well with the likes of Messi, Busquets, Alba, Suarez. I mean, look at the big names, all ex-Barcelona players. And I'm sure that didn't go down well for them after everybody believed they were the team to beat. So there is a lot of redemption in that blood of four players. There were also rumors of Neymar coming to Miami and De Bruyne coming to Miami. There was even rumors of Sergio Ramos coming to Miami, but he's recently signed with another club. But I bet you, not only is this the team to beat, they will be the champions when the season ends, and I even think there's going to be more players, big name players, added to this team here this season. They are the Golden Boy Club, of course, led by co-owner David Beckham. They also have a new coach, letting go of Tata Marino last year. That was a bit of a surprise, in my opinion. Bringing in Javier Mascherano. Is Mascherano better than Tata Marino? I don't necessarily think so. I just believe that whatever Messi wants, Messi gets. And I believe he wanted Mascherano and will get along better with him for whatever reason. We don't know the internal reasonings for that. But there is no doubt about it that the bar is set as high as can be for this team. They will be looking for the Supporters' Shield once again. They will be looking for the League's Cup. They'll be looking to take home the big final trophy when all is said and done. And there's no reason to believe that this isn't going to happen. Not much happened in the offseason, but really, what kind of big offseason moves beyond the coach, do they really need with such a incredible all-star, legendary squad of players like they have? So, really, not much more to add to this. We all know who Inter Miami is. We all know the players they have, and we all know that the expectations that go along with it. No reason they don't rebound here this season. Get the job done. Bring in all the trophies. They're the favorite in all of them. I would put all my money in all the trophies that they're in. League Cup, Supporter Shield, the entire Championship Cup, everything. Why wouldn't you? The only teams that could possibly beat them in the League's Cup are Monterrey, Tigres, these types of teams. But I really think this is the year Messi wants to leave Inter Miami with a big performance. Let his name remain as legendary also in Miami. Win all those cups. Make everybody happy there. And do it with their friend at his new head coach, Mascherano, is part of the helm. And who knows, maybe even bigger name players to come. So a lot to look forward to. If you're an Inter Miami fan, my God, you got to love what you had last year and what you have again here this year. Miami, Inter Miami, the team to beat. Next team, LAFC. Top place finishers in the Western Conference last year. But their arch nemesis, LA Galaxy, was able to win the entire thing, won the cup, and left them disappointed. So even though they were able to finish first, it wasn't enough to get it all said and done in the end. So I'm sure they'll be looking to rebound here, get themselves to the final here this season. And I wouldn't be surprised if it ended up being Inter Miami and LAFC when all is said and done. But a long way to go before that is to happen. The only off-season moves here that really are worth mentioning is the exit of the versatile Mateusz Bogusz. So that in itself right now is an attacking figure that they want to make up for. They still have Bouanga, but obviously you want to make up for Mateusz. And I'm sure they will, because there's rumors still floating around of Antonio Griezmann signing. That happens, that's more than making up. We're talking about another elite level player. But other than that, not really much happening in the offseason here for LA. And why would you when you have the likes of Bouanga, as we just mentioned? You got Hugo Lloris in net, Oliver Giroud up front also. A little bit older now, but hey, he can still produce. Aaron Long on defense. He's great on the corner kicks and the head balls. So he can add some added offense along with his strength being at the back. Don't forget about Timothy Tillman also in the mix. So it's a stacked team. And when you're stacked, there's not much you really need to add. My opinion is if they get Antonio Griezmann, that should levitate them to be able to be right back at the top of the Western Conference and give give Miami a hell of a run for their money if they were to ever meet in the final, and that would be quite the final in my opinion. That would be absolutely fantastic. So really, I expect the same type of results that you saw last year, again here this year. And maybe they take that one extra step and make it to the final here this season. Next team, the LA Galaxy. And man, do they have a season or what? Not only finishing tied for first in the Western Conference with LAFC, they ended up being officially second, only due to one goal difference. LAFC had plus 20 goal differential and LAFC plus 19. Didn't matter in the end. Even though they didn't finish officially first in the Western Conference, they won the whole shebang. Congrats to LAFC and all the fans. But off-season work started right away for LAFC, as they were one of the most cap-strapped teams and therefore ended up having to get rid of a lot of players, including MLS Cup most valuable player Gaston Brugman, also Academy product Jalen Neal. Don't forget about hometown hero Mark Delgado, and probably the biggest name of all, forward Dejan Joveljic. Who did they bring in? Well, it was national midfielder Lucas Sanabria, younger player. He fit an under 22 slot, who will probably end up being a good replacement for Delgado, in my opinion. And other than that, not too much. Let's not forget Puig, who tore an ACL in the Western Conference final against Seattle. Is a massive blow for them. He should be back sometime this season. But when it comes to those types of injuries, how quickly his return will be is up in the air. Not to mention how sharp he'll be. We all know, anyone's had that type of injury. I had myself playing soccer semi-professionally, that when that happens, you're very timid when you return. The confidence isn't where it should be, and it takes some time before you get that all back. So, with all that said, the losses, they didn't bring anybody in with substantial name behind them. The injury to Puig, they got their cup, and I really think that's about it. There's nothing left to cheer for here, because another back-to-back cup is not going to happen. They'll be lucky, like the Columbus Crew, a good example on the other side, to just even make the playoffs and having even an opportunity to go for the cup. So this is very similar to the Crew. They lost a lot of players. They're coming off a big season. Lucky for the Galaxy, they won the whole thing. So they're down in the record books, but this season is not looking too bright as of right now. Anyways, we'll have to wait and see what happens. Maybe some more additional players will come in. Maybe Puig will come back sooner than later, and he'll be back to his old form quicker than expected. But right now, I just don't see a lot of that happening. So, at best, fighting for a playoff spot for the LA Galaxy here this season. Next team, Minnesota United. And here's a team that's quietly just moving up the standings every single year, building a team without necessarily big-name superstars. But hey, finishing 6th in the Western Conference, very close to the top 5, only a couple points behind Houston for 5th, is quietly making progress, heading up the standings and doing it in ways other teams wish they only could. And maybe that's why they didn't do too much here in the off season. They didn't really need to. Whatever they're doing is working. Now, it's not like they didn't do anything. They did bring in an impact player from South Korea who will be looking to drive the United's midfield. That player is Jung Ho Yeon. He is one of South Korea's best young talents. He won the under-23 Asian Games with his squad. And he also has made his senior international debut last year. That is a player worth noting and looking forward to for the United here this season. Now, they also added center back Nicholas Romero. If things work out with him in the back, you got 2 players, not huge names, but big enough names to possibly allow the team to take that next step. Let's not forget, they already have the 3rd highest goal scorer in the league in Luasi. He only finished 3rd, behind Messi and Suarez. So a lot to look forward to with him again here this season. And by the way, that was in the expected goals category, that stat that I just gave you. So who knows where he could head this year in the goal scoring prowess. So this team now adding a big name defender. They've got the goal scoring. They've worked their way up the standings to 6th place. I have a good outlook, possibly a great outlook for this team this year. They might just take over Houston for that 5th spot. move up in the top 5 themselves and be one of those sleeper surprise teams here this season. A lot to look forward to. Not big names, but whatever they're doing is working. A very gelled, chemistry team clicking on all cylinders, and it's just working for Minnesota. Next team, CF Montreal, who finished 8th in the Eastern Conference last year and bowed out of the playoffs right off the bat in the first round against Atlanta United. They were even a surprise, in my opinion, to even finish 8th considering their goal differential. The highest minus goal differential of any playoff team in the league. The Western Conference didn't even have one team that made the playoffs in the negative goal differential. Yet somehow, CF Montreal was able to squeeze into 8th with a minus 16 goal differential. That might have something to do with their scheduling, or they just won a lot of close games, but it's surprising because you look at Nashville, who finished 13th in that Eastern Conference. They also had a goal differential of minus 16. And let's look at even Philadelphia. This is even more shocking, who finished 12th. First time in a while they didn't make the playoffs. They had a plus 7 goal differential. So was that because of a harder schedule? So very interesting tidbit there when I look at Montreal. Really, they could have been one of the last place teams in that division, but were able to squeeze in. So you would have expected a lot of changes here in the offseason. And there were a fair number. They only have one DP, who is Veroni now, who joined them from the Revs. So it'll be interesting to see how he fits into this squad. They also got Prince Owusu from Toronto. Fabian Herber is another name that came in. And I think Owusu, by the way, back to him and Vrioni are making a very interesting pair who are going to have to replace outgoing strikers in Josef Martinez and Matias Corcaro. They also have some youngsters that came in, Jalen Neal and Hannadi Sinchuk. He arrived on the under-22 initiative contract. So it's definitely interesting. They also picked up some younger players last year in Saliba and Marshall Rudy, also from Toronto. So they've got a lot of new players here to put together, and it's a big question mark for me where this team will finish and how this will all come together. Again, I was surprised they even finished 8th considering their goal differential. It seems like a team that has no clear game plan as of right now. Are they just building up youth to be able to loan them out to Europe? Are they actually trying to build that youth and create a team for the future? It's just a lot of question marks. Too many for me to really make a fair prediction. So in reality, I wouldn't be surprised if they were in the same spot battling for that final playoff position, or maybe not even make the playoffs. But it's such a unknown that they could even finish maybe 6th or 7th if everything gelled and went together. So a lot of unknown with this team. It's a crapshoot in my opinion. And at best, it's going to be a lower part of the playoffs for Montreal. Next team, Nashville SC. And I just finished speaking on that Montreal preview. How surprising it was to see Nashville with a minus 16 differential in 13th when CF Montreal had the exact same goal differential in 8th. Now, they did have a long season, tough schedule. They were in the Leagues Cup, all that type of thing. So all that extra play sometimes can make it very tough on your regular season game. So right off the bat, I do expect a better season from a big-name team like Nashville, who's usually been at the top of the standings in previous years. Let's take a look at the offseason moves here to see if that is possible here this season. First thing that's worth noting is their new coach, B.J. Callahan, the former U.S. assistant. He took over the club the latter part of summer of 2024, and he finished out the season with 3 wins. Unfortunately, missing the playoffs as mentioned. But now Callahan will have a full season under his belt to get things ready and rolling here. And the way it looked at last season, he might be the right man for the job. So they're looking good there on the coaching side of things. Now, probably the biggest offseason move that stands out to me was they were able to pick up the most valuable player of the 2024 MLS Cup, adding veteran Uruguayan midfielder Gaston Brugman for Sean Davis. Brugman definitely bolsters a midfield where Nashville also added veteran Honduran stopper Brian Acosta. So that is looking to be one of their main strengths. And as we know in soccer, you need a strong midfield to build the play. And it looks like that's going to be a huge improvement for them here this season. They also have Hanny back. He turns 30 this year. He gave out 18 goals last year. He's going to be relied upon a lot here this season. It was a little bit down from the year before. That might have a lot to do with Nashville's final standings. I think he had 26 in the year prior and 34 in his most valuable player season. So he'll be looking for a rebound season here this year, but nothing wrong with 18 goals. It's just that he has the talent to be able to score a lot more. So that's going to be a big part of the resurgence of Nashville, along with that midfield as mentioned. And I see those factors taking this team back up in the standings, getting back in the playoffs, anywhere from the middle of the pack to the lower pack of the playoff teams. That is a nice step for them. That is a step that's required for a big name team like Asheville. So that is my prediction for them back in the playoffs here for this season. Next team, New England Revolution. And what an absolute disaster of a season it was for New England last year. They finished with only 9 wins out of 34 games. Their goal differential was one of the worst in the leagues, tied with San Jose at minus 37. And biggest reason for that is the worst goals for in the entire league, even worse than San Jose. They only had 37 goals. It's only 1 goal a game on average. Absolutely terrible. So I'm not surprised that right off the bat, we talk about 2 attacking player additions to this New England squad this year. One name, Ganago on loan, and the other, Campana, coming from Inter Miami. These are 2 huge players that will make a difference. Right off the bat, I can tell you this is the biggest news for New England heading into this season. Now, of course, we don't know how this is going to play out, but I'll tell you one thing, especially with Campana. This is a guy that didn't have as much of an opportunity to showcase what he was all about, being that he was backup to Luis Suarez in Inter Miami. But the times he did get to play, you could see he had potential of being one of the best goal scorers in the entire league. Now he will more than get that chance playing full games here for New England. I think this is a great move for Campana. He wasn't going to get a lot of playing times again in Inter Miami this season with the signing of Luis Suarez to another contract. So this is huge for him. Now, as for Ganago, who could also bring a lot of intrigue, you match them together, and you seriously have a potential of one of the best attacking forces in the league. So, again, think about what we're talking about here. A team that low in the standings, that disgraceful of a season, that much of a debacle and farce for goals for, and now you've got this combination to make up for it here this year. So right off the bat, along with not losing any of the other players that they do have and they can build upon and work with and get better with here this season, it's a bright future for New England. It's a bright new season, and I see them battling for a playoff spot. possibly even getting back in the playoffs, and it's redemption year for New England. As such, I expect that to make the fans happy, make management happy, and then after that, they can get a couple more bigger players after that and potentially be right back in the mix in the Eastern Conference. Next team, New York City FC. This is a team that leaves me scratching my head a little bit season after season. Big top place finishes in the Eastern Conference and then disappointing playoff runs. Last season, middle of the pack playoff team, 6th place. Not bad, respectable. But you never know what you're really going to get from this team. The consistency just never seems to be there. On top, they have the worst field in the entire league. I can't wait for them to finally get into their new stadium. I mean, in the end, don't you just expect bigger things from a big city with a big name like New York? I mean, you look at the other side of the conference with LA, both LA teams finishing in the top. Big cities, big name cities with big money. You expect bigger things from New York City being one of them, especially coming off that crushing defeat to the Red Bulls in last year's playoff derby. No surprise they let go of Nick Cushing right after. And now the new manager, Pascal Jansen, will be focused on getting this club back to where it needs to be, back to the top of the Eastern Conference, rivaling and pushing Inter Miami. And they're going to be doing it with a lot of young talent. I think there is potential for this team to take another step up in the right direction again here this year. It could have happened last year. It didn't. I believe that management thinks the new coach is truly what they needed and maybe the only reason why they didn't get further last year. And that might explain why there's really nothing else to talk about when it comes to big offseason moves. They didn't really let go of anybody. They didn't really bring in anybody else. So my belief is that they believe, and I also believe from what I've seen, that it's the coach, the new coach here, Jansen, that's going to put things together with what they have and potentially take that next step. I think at worst, they're right back to where they were last year, but clearly I think this coach will be the difference and get them in the top 5 of the division or of the conference, and then we'll see if they make up for their disappointing playoff result last season. And as mentioned, give Miami a bit of a go here this season. More importantly, keep building for years to come. Next team, we have the New York Red Bulls, the other New York team in the MLS. Interestingly enough, they finished right behind New York City in the standings last year, finishing 7th. And then they had that big playoff victory over New York City, embarrassing them there in that game to shock the world with that big win. And they had a nice run, an unexpected run, and I'm sure they'll be looking to take the next step here this year. And no surprise that pretty much the same squad remains intact for this run here this season. However, they did make a couple notable changes. Their DP striker, Dante Van Zier, moved back to Belgium, while Eric Maxim Choupo-Moting took his place. And then we also have center back Andreas Reyes, who headed to San Diego, expansion new San Diego FC, along with Alexander Hack arriving in that same position. One other transfer worth noting is John Tolkien's transfer to Holstein Kiel earned the Red Bulls a reported $3 million fee and prompted them to add multiple left backs in the hope of replacing their American. So when you look at it overall, you got the experience as a backup at Bayern Munich and Paris Saint-Germain. That Choupo-Moting is definitely the headliner. Now, he hasn't scored more than 10 goals in a single season in his career, and has played more than 1,000 league minutes just once in the past 6 years. But let's think about the leagues we're talking about here with Paris Saint-Germain and Bayern Munich. So now that he's in the MLS, I think this is where the goals get higher. And no reason he shouldn't blow Vazier's full goal performance from 2024 out of the water. So big expectations from Moding here in this move. So where do I see New York when all is said and done? Right up there with New York City, again, in my opinion. And also, if things gel and click, a potential top 5 finish for this New York Red Bull team. That's usually where they always are season after season. No reason to believe that's not going to be the case again this year. Only better things could come out of it. I don't see them going any lower. So look forward to a very exciting season for all you Red Bull fans, as they will be right there when all is said and done, challenging at the end of the season for the Eastern Conference crown. Next team, we have Orlando City. Solid finish for them last year in the Eastern Conference, finishing 4th. They look to challenge Inter Miami for the conference championship. Unfortunately, they fell to the Red Bulls there, who had that nice run, not only beating New York City, but then they beat Orlando. So just one of those things. You get a hot team sometimes that come in and ruin your season, but they have a lot to look forward to. Team is still in place that they had last year with a couple big additions. So a lot to look forward to for Orlando City. Added to the core roster is Marko Pasalic from NHK Rijeka in the Croatian League. He'll be looking to take over for the departed Brazilian Francisco Torres. And speaking of Marko Pasalic, he joins as a designated player in a 3-year contract through 2027 with a club option for 2028. So this is a big-name player. We all know Croatians are a very small but very talented country when it comes to big-name players. That's another one coming out that they will love to watch and will be a big part of the acquisitions here for this team this year. Orlando made an additional signing to deepen the roster with winger Nicolas Rodriguez and added midfielder Edward Utuesta from Palmeiras. Utuesta adds MLS experience. He recorded 11 goals and 29 assists in 124 regular season appearances with LAFC previously, which also helped the Black and Gold clinch that 2019 Supporters Shield and 2024 U.S. Open Cup. So a lot of experience there. And when you look at the overall here, I guess the big question is then, can they take that next step up and compete with Inter Miami? I believe so. So even though Torres is gone, the players that they've brought in make up for it, in my opinion. Orlando is right in the mix. They just had a final preseason game with Inter Miami. And look, 2-2. They are right there. They are that close. Will they win it? I don't think so. But will they be right there at the end? Yes. Good time to be an Orlando City fan. Enjoy what looks to be a very exciting season ahead. Next team, the Philadelphia Union. And a team that's usually in the top of the Eastern Conference standings. What an absolute disaster of a season they had, finishing 12th. The one tidbit, though, and I mentioned it earlier when I was talking about some of the other teams in the Eastern Conference, was the fact that they finished that low in the standings with a +7 differential. They were the only team in the entire league that had a plus goal differential, and not just by a small amount. We're talking +7 here. And finished 12th, a +7, higher than New York City that finished 6th, higher than Red Bulls that finished 7th. I mean, they could have just as easily with that goal differential finished as high as 5th. right there with Charlotte FC. So you really have to scratch your head on that one. They had a tough season schedule. They did have a lot of other U.S. Open and League Cup games. So did other teams. So no surprise right off the bat. They fired their coach, brought in South African-born Bradley Carnell, who was the inaugural manager of St. Louis City. And under the helm of Carnell, they've had some interesting international signings, to say the least, bringing in striker Bruno Damiani, along with midfielder Jovan Lukic, and center back Ian Glavinovic, with multiple homegrown deals also in play. So there's a bit of a hint there that obviously youth is going to be part and key to this rebuild. And it's a shame I have to use that word rebuild, but I really think that's what Philadelphia is going through here. So after the first playoff fail since 2017, I think it is, and farewell to a coach of 11 seasons, Jim Curtin. Wow, what a run that was. Let's not forget, he was 2022 Coach of the Year. So a lot in play here. A lot of unknown. But I think Philly is going to be once again heading back in the right direction. Building with the youth. Building with their name acquisitions. Will they make the playoffs? I don't see why not. I think they could have been in the playoffs last year. So even though it is a bit of a rebuild, it's a bit of a transition. New coaches, new players. If it all gels and comes together, they should be right in the mix. Who knows? Might even be a surprise team. Surprise rebound team. And be in the middle of the playoff pack. Who knows? Any higher than that, I don't see happening. But a step back in the right direction, making the playoffs this year, is to be expected. Next team, we have the Portland Timbers. Well, anytime you make the playoffs, it's considered a semi-successful season. But I'm sure Portland is disappointed they didn't finish higher. They usually do finish higher than ninth. They barely squeezed in to the playoffs. But even more disappointing was the loss they had to rivals Vancouver Whitecaps in that first playoff game, losing 5-0. Talk about humiliating. If that wasn't bad enough, looks like they had some internal gripes or issues some time ago before that game, as star midfielder Evander came out and had some unpleasantary things to say about management and how the fans didn't deserve to have people in power that the Timbers had in their admin. So it wasn't surprising that very soon thereafter, the Brazilian was transferred to Cincinnati for $12 million in cash and plus some add-ons. So kind of an ugly way to finish the season. But it all hasn't been complete doom and gloom. Their biggest name arrival in the offseason had to have been Kevin Kelsey from Shakhtar Donetsk. By the way, of FC Cincinnati, because he was on loan from them. They reportedly shelled out $6 million for Kelsey. So he's going to be obviously expected to lead the line. And also along with them will be former Lens attacker David DaCosta, who also commanded a $6 million transfer fee of his own. So those are the biggest name additions right there, with the whole internal fiasco of Evander gone, a resurgence of getting ready for a new season, coming off that humiliating 5-0 playoff loss and looking to rebound. I expect bigger and better things from Portland I expect another playoff finish. I also expect it to be a playoff that involves them being much higher in the standings with a better positioning, possibly home field advantage in those first one or two games. So, Portland fans, I feel good about your team. Look forward to a bigger and better season to come here this year. Next team, Real Salt Lake. Coming off a fantastic third place finish in the Western Conference, only behind both LA teams in FC and Galaxy. But folks, I don't have the same outlook for this team here, unfortunately, this season. One of the main reasons was the moving of Chico Arango. This one surprised me. He ended up going to San Jose, if you remember. Big player back in the LAFC days. Just recently moved over to Real Salt Lake and now quickly moving over to San Jose. And he wasn't the only DP striker departing. They also lost Matt Crooks, who moved back to England. And on top of that, Anderson Julio went to FC Dallas. So right there, 3 attacking strikers gone. If that all wasn't bad enough, then you have young goalkeeper Gavin Beavers. He moved abroad. And then they brought in Rafael Cabral as their new number 1. On top, who did they bring in to make up for those 3 strikers? Absolutely nobody. The search continues for a new striker. That is not good news for Real Salt Lake. And until a big name arrives, I mean, you got 3 players to make up for, not just him, but until at least one, I don't have a great outlook for this team. I mean, how many goals did Chico get? Almost 20. That's a lot of goals. Add in the goals to the other players they lost. So, right off the bat, this is a huge question mark for me. In order to come anywhere near as close as what you did last season, you need to make up for those players. Now, they did bring in Diogo Gonzalez. He's a DP winger. And Dominic Martzuk, a under 22 initiative player. And also Diego Luna. But, I don't know, maybe Conchalvez is a slight, improvement to what now looks like a very dismal front line. But you got to bring in a lot more to convince me that this team is going to be anywhere near what they were last season. I'm even wondering if they're going to be battling in the middle of the pack or even close to the bottom of the playoffs. I will, for now, say that they'll find a way to make this work and at least be decent. I mean, all the other players involved still helped this team get to where they were last year. So a playoff finish is to be expected. Again, not making it really far after that unless some big summer signings come in before the window closes, midsummer window. Again, just a lot of unknowns. I don't even know really what else to say here because it's so shocking to me that you would get rid of such talented players and not bring in anybody except for the one DP that we talked about in Diogo. It's not enough. We'll see what happens. For now, if they're lucky, Real Salt Lake will be in the playoffs again. But other than that, they're on their way down from last year's results. Next team. And now we've arrived to our expansion, San Diego FC. The debut season for San Diego. And this team is going to be centered around superstar Irving Lozano. They're quickly building up what looks to be a pretty respectful lineup. And it'll be interesting to see what this team has to offer in the first year. if history serves itself well, they'll be decent like a lot of other expansion teams in this league. Head coach Mike Ibarras, formerly an intern with the U.S. men's national team, by the way, has stated early on in the preseason that his players have shown signs of quick adaptation. So right away, hinting the club could hit the ground running and get off to a good start. However, it's words right now. We've got to see it actually happen on the field. But it really comes back down to that Mexican superstar we're talking about, Lozano. The impact that he will have on the field will prove to be the main impact that this team has. He's approaching 30, so he's still in a good age range. He has enough pace. Very good dribbler. And with a standout season, could be right up there for a candidate as most valuable player, in my opinion. He's just that good. And again, truly the key to this expansion team's first season. Other than that, I have nothing else. It's hard to predict what an expansion team is going to do. I'm surely not going to be putting any bets on them. And I'll just have to have a wait-and-see attitude with them to see how their first season comes and if they're going to be competitive or not, although I do not predict a playoff finish for this team this season. Up in the air and possible for year two. Next team, San Jose Earthquakes. And oh, you poor souls, if you are a San Jose Earthquake fan, this has got to be one of the worst organizations in all of sports. They just can't seem to figure it out, can they? With an absolute embarrassing goal differential of minus 37, last place in the Western Conference. What really can be said about this team that just doesn't seem to be able to figure it out and has no clue how to fix what's obviously broke? Dead last in the entire league, as I just mentioned. A whopping 9 points clear in the wooden spoon standings. So, obviously, once again, it's another rebuild for this team. The only difference that I can think of that might be worth mentioning is that this rebuild is now being orchestrated by Bruce Arena. He was hired as sporting director and manager last November and has a good track record in the past as someone that knows how to build a team. So with him at the helm, you would think they'd be a little bit more competitive this year. They can't go the other way. Can't get any worse. There's no other place to go from the basement of the Western Conference. Now, I will say, if you fans have nothing much else to look forward to besides that Arena signing, let's look at the fact that he's already made a ton of player moves. Over 20, if I heard correctly. Both incoming and outgoing, including departures of former mainstays Jeremy Ibibise, Jackson Uil, and Carlos Gurezo. But, as I was just talking about in my previous recording with Real Salt Lake, the biggest acquisition, and you got to give them big kudos for this, was the acquiring of Chico Arango. And he came relatively cheap, too, costing San Jose just $1.4 million in allocation money. So that's huge, because let's not forget, Real Salt Lake spent about $6 million to pry him away from the Colombian Pachucas. So that, in my opinion, is the biggest name acquisition for San Jose. Arena under the helm, making ins and outs as many as he has already is at least something to be excited about. And let's not forget that right after Chico got signed, they also picked up, as an added bonus, added incentive, former league most valuable player Josef Martinez. So this is some added depth. I mean, he's at the later stage of his career, and as we saw in Montreal, might not have that much left, but he does come up with a big goal when you really need it. He could be an absolute super sub. And then all of a sudden, could you even think if that all came to fruition? And maybe Josef Martinez and Chico Arango up front could maybe bring this team to a possible playoffs? Yeah, possibly. San Jose can only go one way. And with Rorina, big names like Josef Martinez and Chico Arango in play, a resurgence, and maybe, just maybe, a team on paper that looks to be headed in the right direction. If it all gels and all comes together, goalkeeper Danielle has a bounce back year this year. Some of the other players step it up. This could end up being one of the most epic turnarounds of any franchise, or at least for this team in this league for this season. This is my biggest dark horse. This is a team that wouldn't shock the world, in my opinion, or might shock the world, but in my opinion wouldn't if they ended up making the playoffs. I think that's my biggest prediction, bold prediction of the season is San Jose to shock the world and maybe squeeze in there, or at least be right in there at the end, contending for a playoff spot. So for once, I think you have something to look forward to, San Jose Earthquake fans. A bigger and better team than previous years. I hope it happens for you. Next team, the Seattle Sounders. And I have to say, if there's one organization that's figured it out, provided a quality team on the field year in and year out, you always know they're going to be there when it's all said and done. The one team I always think of is the Seattle Sounders. This team has always been in the top of the standings. This team has always been there at the end in playoff contention, supporter sealed contention for the whole shebang, cup contention. They have just figured it out, built up a team that is right there every single year. And why? Well, they've done it defensively as the one thing that stands out to me. Yet again, last year, they found a way to have the least amount of goals against, with 35 in the league. That's just one goal a game. That's what you need in order to create such a long tenure of good standing. And again, this is all kudos to the Seattle management. Now, as for acquisitions, they did pick up Jesus Ferreira and Paul Aurelio from FC Dallas. Aurelio cost them $2 million. And they also added an international roster spot for winger Leo Chu. So, not huge names, but big names to an already solid squad. Also, almost forgot Korean defender Kim Hee-ki. He also returns and is a big part of the reason why they have such a great defense. It just clicks. Sometimes it just clicks and it gels. And the management, again, should be given all the kudos in the world for putting together a team, not with the biggest names, but with names that have gelled and worked together perfectly to make such a strong team. So you don't even really need to do much when you have quality like that every year. You just want to bring in one or two players to try to take that extra step, and that's what this team has done. So, with Ferreira and Arola on board, you've got more attacking options now. Schmerzer should have an excellent roster here to use to his advantage. And when it's all said and done, I see no reason why Seattle's not there in the end. Top 5 in the Western Conference, competing for the whole shebang, and probably having, once again, the best defense in the league. It's great to be a Seattle Sounder fan. You know you're going to have a good team every single year, so enjoy another good year once again here this season. Next team, we have Sporting Kansas City. And what an atrocious season this team is coming off of last season, finishing 13th in the Western Conference, only one spot ahead of San Jose. So only one place to look, and that's going up here for Sporting Kansas City this season. What have they done to make that happen? Well, I think a reality check was the biggest thing that happened for this Kansas City team as they started to overhaul pretty much their entire roster. That's something you have to do when you have 3 disappointing seasons in a row. Departures, Polito, Malia, Russell, Fontaz, Walter, just to name a few, are all gone. So they open up some roster spots and cap space. They try to rebuild this. And it's a club that's more than in need of. So you look at sporting director Mike Burns' first winter with the team. It has not gone quietly. They became the first team to use the new MLS's intra-league transfer system, signing big-name Dan Jovalic from the LA Galaxy. They got him for a reported $4 million, so that's going to add to the striker lineup. Let's not forget that he's coming off of the MLS Cup-winning 21-goal campaign, and this was going to be huge for Kansas City, especially for a team whose leading scorer didn't exceed 10 goals in the past 3 years. I can think it's fair to say that's massive. So when you build on the foundation of a team that's on the up and up, no reason why you can't start competing within the next couple of years. With Jovalic, they also signed another DP in Manu Garcia, and also Shapi Suleimanov, also coming from Greece's Aris Thessaloniki. And then you add them to that foundation I was talking about with Saloy, Agata, and Tommy, Davis, Vermis. You got the beginnings of a core here that might be able to bring them back to the lofty heights of eras past. Maybe that's a lot said. Maybe we're jumping to conclusions, but at very least, it's a step in the right direction for Kansas City. I'm not sure they're ready to take a big enough jump to get into the playoffs this year, as their defense is still looking like their weak spot. That's something they're going to have to continue to work on and fix up if they want to have any chance heading into 2026. If they do that, I think playoffs is a real possibility in 2026, but not yet this season. Although, as I said, a step in the right direction is what matters, and that's what the fans have to look forward to. Next team, we have St. Louis City SC. Another team with a disappointing finish to last season, finishing 12th in the Western Conference. That team had much bigger expectations. Beautiful arena. Great fans. Just not the finish they were looking for. They were a good number of points, I think 10, for making a playoff spot. So I'm a little surprised that
it's been as slow as an off season as it has been for St. Louis. Although they did have a lot of late season improvements, adding Betcher, Hartel, Tuchert, all joining last season in the summer transfer window. So that should be something that'll help the squad out here getting a fresh start for the beginning of the year. They already have Berkey in goal, which is probably their main asset. He is, in my opinion, the best goalkeeper in the league and should keep them in games to be able to compete for a playoff spot. They have a new manager, and Olaf Melberg. He'll come in with his wealth of experience as a player in Europe. He also had some times at the helm with several clubs in Sweden and Denmark. So there are some things here that look beneficial. They look like they could be a step in the right direction for St. Louis. They could build upon last year's end. New manager in play, players coming in and out, best goalie in the league. So my prediction will be for St. Louis to be battling in the Western Conference for the last playoff spot. If it is a bigger and better season than expected, things start gelling, and maybe there'll be a bit of a surprise and finish in the middle of the playoff pack. But I think a more reasonable expectation and prediction for this team will be to be battling for that last playoff spot. If they do that, it's a step in the right direction, and they can keep building for there into 2026. Next team, we're looking at the Toronto FC. Well, it's been years of disappointment for Toronto. They didn't make the playoffs for a fourth consecutive year last year. And this all coming off a championship back in 2017. Losing players like Giovinco just seems to have been an absolute disaster for them. They also lost head coach Greg Vanney, who ended up going to LA Galaxy. He won a championship with Galaxy last year. So you would think that Toronto would have been right up there in the top of the standings after that championship and continue to build a contender. Big name city, big name management, big money backers. But that hasn't been the case. It's been far from the case, and adding to the frustration for Toronto fans is the big names they brought in to try to change what's been going on there. Specifically, one of the biggest names out there in Lorenzo Insigne, who cost them big money, and also Federico Bernardeschi, former Juventus player. Insigne used to play for Napoli. Bringing in those two signings, Toronto had a lot to look forward to and a lot of hope. Then they brought in a new coach last year in Herdman. Problem was there was the follow from Spygate, if you remember, at the Paris Olympics where the Canada's women's team were caught spying on New Zealand and France, later revealing a further reaching systemic issue. And former Canada manager, who was John Herdman, ended up having to step down from TSC because of it. And it just seems like this roller coaster of a ride that Toronto is currently on is just never ending. So what has Toronto done to try to fix this mess? Well, another team with a new coach. Colin Fraser comes in. Now, he's had experience with TFC in the past as an assistant coach the championship years with Greg Vanney before moving on to Colorado. Now, he's already done well in his first helm as head coach there in Colorado, bringing that non-playoff team together and bringing them to the playoff run before returning to Toronto. So he's got extensive league experience. Also was a player back in the day. And he'll be looking to fix what's seriously broke. What will happen here this year is really dependent on new signings and a new system that Fraser has in play for Toronto. They brought in a couple new players, one from Norway up front, and another homegrown player out of Belgium in Theo, who'll be looking to take over striker positions and allowing Bernadeschi also to have a more striker role. He was coming back a lot more with Herdman last season. Up and down the field is wasting a lot of energy. So with those three up front and moving Lorenzo Insigne to a more midfielder position, a number 10 role, allowing him to use his skill in dribbling and passing to an advantage, it could be an interesting outlook for Toronto. Now, will that all come to fruition? There's been a lot of internal issues with Lorenzo Insigne and Federico Bernardeschi, a lot of rumors of them going back to Italy or other squads. Lorenzo Insigne, they had 3 deals on the table for him here in the offseason to go to Besiktas and some other teams in Europe, which he all denied. Due to his contract, he's allowed to deny these offers. So it's really hard to understand. Does he want to play in Toronto? If so, why hasn't it clicked? If he wants out of Toronto, why hasn't he accepted any of these deals? So again, there is a ton of unknown with Toronto. This is a team with talent on paper that should be higher, should be at least in the playoffs. But again, it hasn't come into fruition. Will things finally click here under Colin Fraser this year? I really couldn't tell you. It's a flip of the coin. But you would think things have to be headed back into a better direction for them this year. And my prediction will be for them to be battling for that one lower playoff spot. If it doesn't click and they continue to have internal issues, it might even hit rock bottom and go the other way, and they might end up near the bottom of the standings once again. So too many unknowns for me to make a prediction I'm going to put my money on, but we'll say for now, if things click, there is a potential for them to possibly get back in the playoffs for the first time in 5 years. Next team, we have the Vancouver Whitecaps. Whitecaps finished 8th, were able to squeeze into the Western Conference playoffs last year, and they had that big win over their rival Portland Timbers, winning 5-0 before bowing out thereafter. Not exactly the season Vanni Sartini was expecting. They had much higher hopes, and maybe that's why it was time for the former coach Vanni Sartini to move on. He's no longer in charge. There also loss of a DP, and Stuart Armstrong is gone. He was only there a few months. And Fafa Pacult, who was second in assists and third for goal contribution last season, is also no longer in the picture. So there's a lot going on here for Vancouver. There were even some rumors that the team would be sold and not even be in Vancouver anymore. When I hear those kind of things, it's a lot of internal issues, a lot of internal problems, a lot of players that probably don't even want to play in Vancouver because of it. So you got yourself an uphill battle here to try to fix what looks like could be a broken team and a team headed in the wrong direction heading into this season. My opinion is it's going to be an uphill battle for new coach Jesper Sorensen. It's also his first stint in the MLS. The bit of good news for Sorensen is that the club has Brian White still in play. And he also has been scoring at international level with the UN's men's national team last month. So it is at least a bit of a bright spot for Vancouver heading into the season. The only other move worth mentioning was the parted ways of Armstrong, who went to Club Sheffield. And what did they brought in return for him? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. So that was the biggest offseason move. In all honesty, I don't have anything really good to tell you, Vancouver fans, unfortunately. I see this team only getting worse with all the internal rumblings of the team possibly being sold. New coach who doesn't have a lot of star players to choose from. I don't see them making the playoffs. I see them being one of the bottom 6 outside the playoffs here in the Western Conference. And I would not be surprised if they're one of the bottom 3. Maybe not even in just the conference, but in the league. It looks just that dismal. I hope I'm wrong for all you Vancouver fans, but there's just nothing that I see happening here in the offseason that's to look forward to, other than Brian White being still part of your team. That's really about it. And let's face it, one player is not enough to carry you the entire season. So good luck to Vancouver. You need to figure out what looks to be an absolute mess. Okay, folks, and now after the full review of the 30 MLS teams, I'm going to give you one best bet for this Saturday's Week 1 games. You don't want to press your luck here on the first week of the season. If I do have some opinions, I would advise you to try to stick with teams that have new head coaches, based on the reviews I also gave you on teams that have made some big acquisition names, looking to make a step up from last season's final results. Those are teams you want to be looking for, want to be betting on. And if you really need that action, that's what I would advise you to do. So take a look at those teams. Again, new head coaches, new big name acquisitions, teams looking to make a big rebound from last season. And one of the rebounds will be part of my Week 1 best bet. It's going to be on Inter Miami. And you might say right off the bat, well, what do you mean rebound with Inter Miami? Well, I'm talking about the playoff debacle that was for a team that was expected to win the whole thing, playing Atlanta in that 2-game leg, only to be disappointed and bounced out of the first round. Nobody saw that coming. Who would have thunk that? They have that in the back of their minds. It will be in play right from game 1, and I guarantee you Messi and the boys, Busquets, Alba, Suarez, will remind the rest of the team, we need to get off to a good start. We need to let everybody know again who we are, what we are, and what to expect when you come into Miami. You've got a great line on this game against New York City. I expect New York City to be a good team. They're just going to be catching the wrong team in the first game. Inter Miami also playing a few days prior in a Leagues Cup game, so they're going to be in great position to have more preseason matchups under their helm and ready to go for this one. They're going to want to get off to a great start to start the season. I expect nothing less than Inter Miami to finish up here with a win. I think the line is anywhere from -130, -140. You can't beat that on an Inter Miami game at home on a Saturday night in front of a home crowd to open the season. That is my Week 1 best bet. We'll have more plays as the weeks progress. Teams start to gel and they get a better feel for what's going on with each and every team. Expect another big season from your Phenom. Again, Inter Miami, folks, take them to the bank. I should be back again sometime next week with games being usually on Wednesdays and Saturdays. I'll probably have Monday, Thursday type recording days. Nothing written in stone just yet. We'll see how the season progresses, so stay tuned. That's why you need to like and subscribe so you know when my videos are coming out. I will make you a ton of money once again, just like I did in the NFL. Enjoy it. Again, Inter Miami, my best bet for Week 1. Let's get this money. See ya.